He thought he was only returning to a small cave house his grandmother left behind. Deep in the northern forest, right at the cave entrance, a wounded German shepherd lay still. Too weak to move, yet its eyes locked onto him. He didn't walk away. He carried the dog inside, cleaned its wounds, and gave it warmth by the fire. But when the dog regained a little strength, it didn't rest. It stood, turned toward the deeper cave, and began scratching at the ground, as if something beneath the stone was calling it. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. The call came on a morning that felt too quiet to be real. Elias Thorne stood in the back of a small repair garage on the edge of a northern town, one hand resting on the cold steel frame of a dismantled engine. The place smelled of oil, metal, and long hours. Exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear without anyone asking why. Sunlight filtered weakly through the dusty windows, catching on floating particles that moved like slow snow in the air. He didn't like silence like this. Not anymore. At 43, Elias carried himself with the controlled stillness of a man who had learned to move only when necessary. He stood at about 6'1", broad-shouldered, his body lean but solid, every line shaped by years of Navy SEAL training rather than a gym mirror. His face was angular, carved with sharp lines along the jaw, the kind of face that looked like it had endured more than it ever explained. A faint stubble framed his mouth and chin, never fully shaved, never fully grown. His eyes, blue-gray, steady, held a quiet distance, as if always measuring something unseen. His hair was short, dark brown, cut in a practical military style. At the temples, silver had already begun to creep in, early and unapologetic. He wore the same thing he always wore, an olive field jacket, worn but maintained. Underneath, a red and dark blue plaid shirt, dark cargo pants, brown leather boots that had seen better years but still held firm. On his wrist, an old military watch, scratched, dependable. A folding knife clipped inside his pocket. And leaning against the wall nearby, his Eberle-stock half-track backpack, packed not out of habit, but because he never really unpacked anymore. The phone rang. It was an old landline, mounted crookedly near the wall. The sound cut through the garage like a blade, sharp, out of place. Elias stared at it for a second too long before picking it up. Thorne. A pause, then a voice. Calm, professional, distant. Mr. Elias Thorne. My name is Daniel Everett. I'm calling regarding your grandmother, Agnes Thorne. The name landed like a memory that had been buried under too many years. Elias didn't speak. I'm sorry to inform you, the voice continued, softer now. She passed away 3 days ago. Peacefully. At her residence in Black Hollow Ridge. The garage seemed to shrink. Agnes Thorne. A woman who had lived alone in the mountains for decades. A woman who had raised him for a time when no one else could. A woman who spoke little but always said exactly what mattered. He hadn't seen her in years. Not because he didn't care. Because he didn't know how to come back. There is a will, the man added. She left you her property, a house located within a cave formation on the ridge. You are listed as the sole recipient. Elias closed his eyes for a moment. A cave. Of course she had. I'll come, he said finally. The funeral was small. The kind of small that felt less like mourning and more like obligation. The church stood at the center of town, a simple white building surrounded by tall pine trees that seemed to lean inward, as if listening. The air carried the quiet chill of a coming winter, the kind that settled into bone. Inside, people spoke in low voices. Not grief, not really. More like commentary. She lived up there alone all those years. Strange woman. Never trusted anyone. Elias sat in the back pew, unmoving. To them, Agnes Thorne had been a story. To him, she had been something else. He remembered her hands, strong, steady. He remembered her voice, quiet but certain. Not everything that's hidden is meant to be found, Elias. He hadn't understood it then. He wasn't sure he did now. After the service, the lawyer approached him. Daniel Everett was a thin man in his late 50s, tall but slightly stooped, with neatly combed gray hair and sharp cheekbones. His suit was immaculate, his glasses narrow, his eyes observant in a way that suggested he noticed more than he said. He carried himself with the careful politeness of someone used to handling other people's losses. She was very specific, Everett said, placing something into Elias's hand. A key, iron, heavy, cold. Your grandmother wanted you to have this personally. Elias turned it in his palm. It felt older than memory. The road to Black Hollow Ridge narrowed the farther he drove. The town disappeared behind him, replaced by forest. Tall pines, dense undergrowth, and a kind of silence that felt deliberate. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in long beams, illuminating moss-covered rocks and narrow streams cutting through the earth. The air was clean, almost too clean, stripped of everything unnecessary. Elias noticed it halfway up. No birds. Not a single one. He slowed the truck slightly, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing moved. The forest wasn't dead, but it was listening. The road ended in a clearing. Beyond it, the land dipped into a natural basin hidden from view. Elias stepped out, boots pressing into damp soil. He adjusted his jacket, slung his pack over his shoulder, and moved forward, down the slope. And then he saw it. A stone hollow carved by time, its walls covered in thick green moss. Thin streams of water traced their way down the rock, catching light that poured in from an opening high above. The air inside felt cooler, quieter, like stepping into something preserved. And there, set into the curve of the cave, was the house. Small, wooden, built into the rock as if it belonged there. Not abandoned, not broken, waiting. Elias stopped. For a moment, he didn't move. Something about it pressed against his chest. Not fear. Something else. Recognition. Then he heard it. A faint shift. Not wind, not water, something alive. Elias turned his head. The dog lay near the door, half in shadow. A German shepherd. Large, though thinned by hunger. Its black and tan coat was dirty, matted in places, streaked with dried blood. One ear drooped slightly. Its ribs showed beneath its fur, but its eyes sharp, focused, awake, watching him. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't move. Elias stepped closer, slow, measured. The dog tensed, but stayed. That told him everything. He crouched slightly. Easy, he said. The word came naturally. The dog's ears flicked. Elias studied it more closely. Then, without thinking, stay. The reaction was small, but undeniable. The dog didn't move, but its posture shifted, tightening with recognition. Training. Real training. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. This wasn't a stray. This was a working dog, a K9, and somehow it had ended up here. He stood slowly, eyes never leaving the animal. Yeah, he muttered. You're not lost. The dog blinked once. Elias turned to the door and slid the key into the lock. It resisted, then gave. The door opened with a low creak. Cold air drifted out. Elias glanced back. You coming? The dog hesitated only a second, then pushed itself up, favoring one leg, and followed him inside. The house smelled like wood, herbs, and thyme. Light filtered through dusty windows, touching everything just enough to reveal, not enough to explain. The furniture was simple. A table, chairs, a stone fireplace built into the rock wall. Everything was still, not abandoned, preserved. Elias dropped his pack, moved to the fireplace, and began building a fire. Behind him, the dog circled once, then lay near the hearth. Close enough for warmth, far enough to react. Always ready. Elias watched it for a moment. "You've done this before." No answer, just steady breathing. The fire caught. Light filled the room. Warmth followed. Elias sat back against the stone wall, elbows resting on his knees. Across from him, the dog lay still, eyes half open, watching, not afraid, not trusting, just there. Elias looked into the flames, then spoke quietly. "Guess you're staying." The dog's tail moved once. Outside, the forest held its silence. Inside, the fire burned steady, and for the first time in a long while, Elias Thorne didn't feel like he was passing through. Morning did not arrive all at once. It seeped into the cave slowly, thin strands of pale gold slipping through the opening above, touching the moss-covered walls, then crawling across the wooden floor in quiet, patient lines. The air was colder than the night before, but cleaner somehow, as if the mountain had exhaled while they slept. Elias Thorne was already awake. He sat near the fireplace, boots planted firmly on the floor, elbows resting on his knees, watching the last embers fade into gray ash. Sleep had come in fragments, never fully, never deep. Years of training had carved that into him. Even here, especially here, his body refused to surrender completely. Across the room, the dog was awake too. It hadn't moved much. Still lying near the hearth, head lowered between its paws, eyes open. Watching. Not him. The room. Elias noticed that immediately. Not a pet's curiosity. Not even a guard dog's alertness. This was something else. Pattern recognition. Threat mapping. He had seen it before. In men, mostly. In soldiers who had stayed too long in places where every sound could mean something. Elias leaned back slightly, studying the animal in silence. "You're not just passing through either, are you?" he muttered. The dog didn't respond. It didn't need to. Elias reached for his pack, pulling out a small metal tin. Inside were basic medical supplies, gauze, antiseptic, tape. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep something alive. He stood slowly and approached. The dog's body stiffened, just enough to show it felt the movement. But it didn't retreat. That mattered. Elias crouched beside it, movement slow, controlled. "Easy," he said again, quieter this time. He reached toward the dog's front leg. The wound was worse in daylight. A deep slice across the lower limb, clean edges, not jagged. The kind of cut that came from something sharp. Metal, not teeth, not rock. Elias frowned slightly. "You didn't get that from the woods?" He poured a little water from a canteen over the wound. The dog flinched, but didn't pull away. Muscles tightened. Breath slowed. No sound. Not even a whine. Elias paused for a second, then nodded slightly to himself. "Yeah, you've done this before." He cleaned the wound carefully, wiping away dirt and dried blood. Underneath, the tissue was inflamed, but not infected, yet. Good. He wrapped it with gauze, firm but not restrictive. The dog watched every movement, not fearful, evaluating. When Elias finished, he leaned back slightly. "You've got discipline," he said under his breath. "More than most people." The dog blinked once. He stood and stretched his shoulders. The house felt different in daylight. Less like a memory, more like a question. Elias began to move through the room, slow, deliberate. He didn't rush. He never rushed. The table stood near the center, scarred wood, worn edges. 2 chairs, one slightly uneven. On the far wall, the stone fireplace extended upward into the rock, the chimney built through a natural crack in the cave ceiling. And then, he saw it, mounted just above a narrow wooden shelf. A radio, old, not decorative, functional. The casing was metal, scratched but intact. Wires ran from the back, not into the wall, but directly into the stone. Thin cables disappeared into small drilled holes, sealed around the edges. Elias stepped closer. That's not standard. He crouched slightly, examining the setup. This wasn't something you bought and installed. This was integrated, deliberate. His fingers hovered near the wire, but he didn't touch it. Not yet. Behind him, the dog shifted. Not much, just enough. Elias glanced back. The animal had lifted its head. Ears forward, eyes fixed. Not on him. On the deeper part of the cave. The section beyond the living space, where the rock curved inward and the light didn't reach as easily. Elias followed its gaze. Nothing moved. No sound. Just shadow. He stood slowly. Something bothering you? The dog didn't answer. It simply watched. Elias turned away for now. There would be time. He moved toward the far corner, where a small wooden chest sat partially tucked beneath a narrow table. He opened it. Inside. Paper. Old. Folded carefully. He lifted one piece out. A map. Hand-drawn. Not a tourist map, not something printed. This was detailed. Contour lines, elevation markings, handwritten notes in the margins. Certain areas were circled in red, others crossed out entirely. Coordinates were written along the edges. Not random. Precise. Elias's eyes narrowed. This isn't hiking. He flipped to another sheet. More notes, short phrases, numbers, symbols that looked like abbreviations, but not for anything civilian. He recognized the pattern, not the meaning, but the structure. Field documentation. Someone had been recording something. Systematically. He stood there longer than he meant to. The quiet pressed in again. Not empty. Listening. The sound came from behind him. A soft, sudden scrape. Elias turned instantly. The dog had moved. It wasn't lying down anymore. It stood near the back wall, closer to the darker section of the cave. One paw lifted, frozen mid-step. Not hesitation. Detection. Its head tilted slightly, ears sharp, eyes focused on a single point in the wooden floor. Then, without looking at Elias, it tapped once. Exactly once. On the same spot. Elias didn't move right away. His instincts said to stay still, observe. The dog tapped again. Same place, same controlled motion. This wasn't random. This was communication. Elias stepped closer, slow and silent. The floor looked normal. Same wood, same wear. But when he crouched and pressed his hand against it, he felt it. A difference. Subtle. The vibration under his palm was off. He knocked lightly. The sound that came back was deeper than the rest of the floor. Hollow. Elias exhaled slowly. Interesting. The dog stepped back half a pace, but didn't leave. It watched him, waiting. Elias didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he stood and looked around the room again. At the radio, at the maps, at the wires disappearing into stone, at the dog. Everything connected. But not clearly. Not yet. He moved toward the door and stepped outside. The air hit him immediately, cold, sharp, clean. The basin looked different in full daylight, brighter, almost peaceful. Water trickled down the rock walls, feeding into a narrow stream that ran across the clearing. The surface reflected the cabin, the light, the sky above. Elias scanned the ground, slow, careful, and then he saw it. Tracks. Not fresh snow, but damp earth. Compressed. Not animal. Too wide, too deep. He crouched, fingers tracing the edge. Tread pattern, heavy, industrial. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's not a hiker." The tracks stopped near the tree line. Didn't go all the way in, as if whoever made them didn't want to be seen coming closer. Elias stood, looked back at the cabin, then toward the forest. Behind him, the dog stepped out onto the threshold. It stood there, silent, watching the same direction, not the house, the woods. Elias glanced at it, then back at the trees. Something was off, not loud, not obvious, just enough. He felt it, the same way he had before entering a room that didn't want him there. He adjusted his jacket, eyes narrowing slightly. "Well," he said quietly, almost to himself, "looks like you picked the right place." The dog didn't move. It didn't need to. Inside the cave, beneath the floor, something waited. Outside, in the forest, someone had already been there. And between those two stood a man who didn't believe in coincidence. And a dog that didn't believe in anything except what it could sense. The mountain did not change overnight. It only revealed more of itself. By mid-morning, the light inside the cave had shifted. Stronger now, pouring through the opening above in clean, angled beams that touched the wooden floor and climbed the stone walls. The place felt almost peaceful, if not for the quiet tension that had settled beneath everything. Elias Thorne stood near the entrance, scanning the basin below. He hadn't moved the floor panel, not yet. Some instincts didn't come from training. They came from experience, knowing when something needed time before being disturbed. Behind him, Rook stood still, weight balanced across 3 legs, the injured one barely touching the ground. The dog's ears tilted forward, catching something beyond the obvious. Elias followed its line of sight. Nothing. But that didn't mean there was nothing there. The sound of boots on gravel came from above, not loud, but deliberate. Elias turned instantly, body tightening into readiness without thought. His hand moved subtly toward the pocket where his knife rested. Rook didn't bark. It stepped forward instead, positioning itself slightly ahead of Elias, a barrier. A figure appeared at the edge of the slope, then descended, carefully, not clumsy, not lost. Someone who knew how to move in uneven terrain. The woman reached the bottom of the basin and paused a few feet away, taking in the cave, the house, and finally, Elias. Her posture was balanced, alert without being aggressive. "Didn't expect anyone to be up here this early," she said. Her voice was steady, neutral, not unfriendly, but not inviting either. Elias didn't answer right away. He studied her. She was in her mid-30s, maybe a little younger. Around 5'7", lean but strong, the kind of build that came from long hours outdoors rather than training for appearance. Her hair was chestnut brown, tied loosely at the back, strands falling naturally around her face. Her skin carried a light tan, weathered just enough to show time spent under open sky. Her eyes were sharp, green-gray, observant, always measuring. She wore a moss-green Ranger parka, slightly worn at the edges, layered over a gray knit sweater. Dark outdoor pants, practical boots, and a compact backpack that looked like it carried more tools than personal items. Not a tourist, not a hiker, something else. "Mara Keene," she said after a moment, as if deciding he wasn't a threat. "Forest ecology, technically." She gestured vaguely toward the woods behind her. I track things that don't behave the way they're supposed to. Elias nodded once. Elias Thorne. Her gaze flicked briefly to Rook, then back to Elias. That yours? No. Mara tilted her head slightly. Didn't think so. She crouched down a little, not approaching, just lowering her posture. The dog didn't move. Didn't relax either. Mara studied it carefully. That's not a stray, she said quietly. Look at the stance, the eyes. That's trained. Elias glanced at her. You've seen working dogs before? Enough to know when something doesn't belong out here. She straightened again. And whatever put that wound on him? She nodded toward Rook's leg. Wasn't an accident. Silence settled between them for a second. Then Mara looked past Elias, into the cave, toward the house. Her expression changed. Subtle. But Elias caught it. Recognition. You've been here before, he said. It wasn't a question. Mara exhaled slowly. Once, she said. A long time ago. With someone who thought your grandmother was just a hermit. She shook her head slightly. She wasn't. Elias watched her closely. Then what was she? Mara hesitated, then said something that didn't quite sound like an answer. She was waiting. The word hung in the air. Elias didn't react outwardly, but something inside him shifted. Mara stepped closer to the cave entrance, eyes scanning the structure, the rock, the wood. She ever tell you what she was doing up here? No. Figures. She glanced at the walls. Animals started leaving this area about 2 months ago, she said. Not all at once, gradually. Migration paths changed. Deer stopped crossing certain ridges, even birds. Some of them won't nest near this slope anymore. Elias's jaw tightened slightly. I noticed that. Mara nodded. There's more. Water samples downstream, trace oil residue. Not enough to kill anything. Just enough to say something's leaking where it shouldn't. She looked toward the forest. And at night, if you stay still long enough, you can feel it. Feel what? Mara met his eyes. A vibration. Low, deep, not natural. Behind them, Rook shifted. Not toward the forest, toward the cave. Elias noticed immediately. The dog moved past him, slow but deliberate, heading deeper inside. Mara watched it. That's not random, she said. No. They followed. Inside, the light faded gradually, replaced by cooler tones where the cave extended inward. Rook moved directly toward the back wall, not the floor panel from before, a different spot. A section of wood fitted tightly against stone. Elias frowned. That wasn't obvious earlier. Mara stepped closer, examining the surface. Because it's not supposed to be. She ran her fingers lightly along the edge. There, a seam, thin, precise. Rook didn't bark, didn't paw at it wildly. It simply stepped forward and placed its nose gently against the seam. Then it went still. Completely still. Not breathing heavily. Not shifting, just listening. Elias felt it. Not a sound. Not exactly. More like pressure. A faint vibration running through the wood, through the stone behind it, through the air itself. Mara's eyes widened slightly. You feel that too? Elias didn't answer. He stepped forward, pressed his hand flat against the wood. There it was. Subtle, but real. Something moving, far below. Help me, he said. Mara didn't hesitate. They pushed together. The panel resisted at first, then slid sideways with a low, grinding sound. Behind it, darkness. And something else. Metal. Elias reached into his pack, pulled out a flashlight, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing A narrow cavity carved into the rock. Not natural. Too clean. Too precise. Inside, objects. Wrapped carefully. Protected. Mara exhaled softly. Your grandmother wasn't hiding from the world, she said. She was hiding something from it. Elias reached in, pulled out the first item, a map. More detailed than the one from the chest, marked, layered. Coordinates written in tight, controlled handwriting. Next, a small notebook. Pages filled with symbols, numbers, coded entries. Mara flipped through it quickly. This isn't random logging data, she said. This is structured. Military? Elias asked. She shook her head slightly. Close, but older. He pulled out another item. Photographs, black and white, grainy, structures, metal frameworks rising from rocky ground. Antenna towers, half-buried installations. Mara leaned closer. Those aren't from here, she said. Elias studied the angles, the terrain. They are, he said quietly. At the bottom, one last piece. A folded letter. The paper was worn, edges softened by time. Elias opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakable. Agnes Thorne. He read silently, then stopped. His grip tightened slightly. Mara watched him. What does it say? Elias didn't answer immediately. Then, quietly, if the dog finds you first, it means they've already come back. Silence. Heavy, still, Mara looked at Rook, then back at Elias. That dog didn't wander here, she said. No. Elias folded the letter slowly. His eyes moved toward the cave entrance, toward the forest beyond. The sound came then. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A low mechanical hum, carried through the trees, through the ground, through the air. Rook turned toward it instantly, body tense, eyes sharp. Elias stood, the map still in his hand, the letter folded tight in his pocket. Yeah, he said quietly. To himself, to the dog, to the mountain. They're not hiding anymore. Outside, the forest held its breath, and somewhere beyond the ridge, machines were already awake. The road down the mountain felt different. Not because it had changed, but because Elias Thorne had. The forest no longer felt quiet. It felt occupied. Every bend in the narrow dirt path, every stretch of pine and shadow carried a weight that hadn't been there before. The sunlight still filtered through the trees in long, clean beams, but now it seemed thinner, as if something beneath the surface was pulling the warmth away. Elias drove slowly, hands steady on the wheel. Beside him, Mara Keene sat forward in her seat, one arm resting on her knee, the other gripping a folded map she had taken from the cave. Her sharp green-gray eyes scanned the passing terrain, not casually, but with purpose. In the truck bed behind them, Rook stood braced against the motion, body balanced despite the injured leg. His head stayed low, nose testing the air whenever the wind shifted. He wasn't resting. He was tracking. Pine Hollow appeared gradually. A small northern town carved into the valley between forested ridges. Wooden storefronts, faded paint, quiet streets. The kind of place where people noticed strangers, but didn't always ask questions. Elias parked near a general store with a sagging roof and a bell above the door. Stay alert, Mara said quietly. Elias nodded once. He didn't need the reminder. Inside, the air smelled of old wood, coffee, and dust. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 60s, heavy-set, with a thick gray beard and pale blue eyes that carried both warmth and caution. His name tag read Marvin Kessler. Marvin looked up, recognition flickering in his expression. Well, he said, voice rough but not unfriendly. "If it isn't Agnes Thorne's boy." Elias inclined his head slightly. "Been a while." Marvin studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Too long." His gaze shifted to Mara, then toward the window, where Rook's silhouette could be seen outside. Marvin's expression tightened. "You brought company." "Not by choice," Elias said. Marvin grunted. "No one ever does." The bell above the door rang again. Elias didn't turn immediately. He felt it first, a presence, controlled, measured, not loud, not careless. Then the man stepped inside. Tall, around late 40s, clean, too clean for this place. Silas Vane moved like someone who never wasted motion. His posture was straight, relaxed, but deliberate. His face was sharp, long lines, high cheekbones, and a controlled expression that never quite revealed what he was thinking. His dark hair was neatly styled, touched lightly with silver at the temples, and his eyes, cold gray, held a quiet intensity that felt more like calculation than emotion. He wore a charcoal overcoat, tailored perfectly over a dark shirt. Everything about him spoke of precision, of control, of someone used to getting what he wanted. Silas's gaze landed on Elias, then Mara, then flicked briefly toward the door, where Rook stood outside. "Elias Thorne," Silas said smoothly, as if they were already acquainted. Elias didn't respond. Silas smiled slightly, not warm, not hostile, just polite. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Mara's shoulders stiffened slightly. Elias noticed, filed it away. Silas stepped closer, stopping just short of personal space. "I represent North Vale Development," he said. "We've taken an interest in the ridge you've inherited." "Funny," Elias said evenly. "Didn't think anyone else cared about that place." Silas's smile deepened. Just enough. "Oh, we care," he said. "Some places simply have potential." Elias held his gaze. "And some places don't need to be touched." Silas tilted his head slightly. "Perhaps," he said. "But sometimes leaving things alone is the most dangerous choice of all." Silence settled between them, heavy, measured. Then Silas stepped back, straightened his coat. "Just a thought," he said lightly. "Some places aren't meant to remain hidden forever." He turned and left. The bell rang again. Then silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Mara exhaled slowly. "That's him," she said quietly. Elias glanced at her. "You know him." "I know what he represents," she said. "North Vale's been surveying land across this region for months. Quietly. Too quietly." Elias leaned against the counter. "What are they looking for?" Mara met his eyes. "Not trees?" Outside, Rook shifted. Elias saw it through the window. The dog's head turned sharply toward the edge of town. Nose lifted. Something caught. Elias pushed off the counter. "Time to go." The drive back up the mountain felt shorter. Or maybe the tension made it seem that way. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. By the time they reached the cave, the sun had begun to dip. Light filtered in softer now, stretching shadows across the basin. Elias stepped out first. Rook jumped down from the truck bed, landing carefully, immediately scanning the perimeter. Mara followed. Her eyes moved across the clearing, then stopped. Something's wrong. Elias felt it too. Not obvious. But there, a shift. The door to the house was closed, exactly as they left it. But the ground near the entrance, disturbed. Slightly. Boot prints. Careful, intentional. Elias moved forward. Slow, hand near his knife. Rook stayed close. body tense, silent. Inside, the air felt colder. Not temperature, something else. Nothing looked out of place. At first, table, chairs, fireplace, everything where it should be. Then Elias saw it. The open compartment in the wall. Still there, but not untouched. He stepped closer, checked the contents. Map, notebook, photographs. Still there. But something was missing. One page, from the coded journal. Not torn randomly, not scattered, removed. Clean, precise. They knew exactly what to take, Mara said quietly. Elias nodded. They've been watching. Behind them, Rook let out a low, almost silent growl. Not aggressive, not loud. A warning. Elias turned. The dog stood near the doorway, head lowered, eyes fixed on the forest. Elias stepped outside. Slow, careful. The trees stood still, light fading, wind barely moving. Then he caught it. Faint, but unmistakable. The smell. Oil, metal, hot machinery. Rook moved forward. One step, then another, not limping now, focused, driven. Elias followed, Mara close behind. They moved past the edge of the basin, into the trees. The forest thickened quickly. Light fractured through branches. Shadows layered over shadows. The ground softened underfoot, covered in pine needles and damp earth. Rook didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose. Tracking. Elias matched his pace. Silent, controlled, every sense alert. After several minutes, the terrain shifted. Rock began to break through the soil. The trees thinned slightly, and the ground ahead changed. Rook stopped. Suddenly, Elias froze. The dog's ears lifted. Body still. Eyes locked forward. Elias crouched slowly. Brushed aside a thin layer of snow and leaves. Underneath, metal, not natural, not exposed, hidden. He moved a little further, pushed aside more debris. A grid, camouflage netting, stretched tightly across something beneath, blended carefully with the forest floor. Mara inhaled sharply. "They're not just surveying," she whispered. Elias stared at the structure, then back toward the direction of the cave. "They're already inside the mountain." Rook stood beside him, silent, still, certain. Above them, the last light of day filtered through the trees. But beneath their feet, something else was awake. The forest closed behind them, like a door that had never been open. Elias Thorne crouched low beside the camouflaged grid, one hand brushing away the last thin layer of snow. Beneath it, the netting stretched taut. Woven fibers blended with dirt, pine needles, and shadow. It was done well. Not rushed, not careless. Professional. Rook stood just ahead, body angled toward the concealed structure, muscles tight beneath his black and tan coat. His amber eyes didn't move, not scanning, fixed, locked on something deeper than sight. Mara knelt beside Elias, her fingers tracing the edge of the netting carefully, as if expecting it to react. "This wasn't put here recently," she said quietly, "but it's been maintained." Elias nodded once, meaning someone's still using it. He reached forward and lifted a corner of the netting. Underneath, steel, a hatch, rectangular, reinforced, set flush with the ground. No rust, no decay, maintained, alive. Elias ran his hand along the edge. No handle, no visible lock. But there, a seam, thin, engineered. "Step back," he said. Mara didn't argue. Rook didn't move. Elias shifted his weight, placing his boot against the edge and applying pressure. Nothing. Then, he adjusted slightly, changed the angle, pressed again. A sound answered. Not loud, but precise. A mechanical click. The hatch shifted. Just enough. Air escaped from below, cold, dry, carrying something faint. Metal, oil, electric heat. Elias exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he murmured. "They're definitely down there." He pulled the hatch open fully. Darkness waited beneath. A narrow ladder descended into it, metal rungs bolted into concrete. Old construction, but reinforced. Rook moved first, not jumping, not rushing, descending with controlled precision, testing each step before committing weight. Even injured. He adapted. Elias followed. Then Mara. The hatch closed above them with a soft, deliberate thud. And just like that, the forest disappeared. The tunnel stretched forward in a straight line. Concrete walls, reinforced with steel ribs at regular intervals. Cables ran along both sides, bundled, labeled, some old enough to have faded markings, others newer, tightly secured. Lights flickered overhead, not stable, but active. Mara ran her fingers lightly along one of the cable bundles. "This isn't just power," she said. "Signal lines, too." Elias scanned ahead. "Relay infrastructure," she nodded. "But not civilian." They moved deeper. Each step echoed faintly, absorbed by the long corridor. The air grew warmer the farther they went. Not natural, mechanical. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Not massive, not a city, but structured, purpose-built. Rows of old relay panels lined the walls, metal frames, switches, dials, most of them worn with age. But interwoven among them, new equipment, digital modules, portable transmitters, modern power units feeding into systems that were never designed for them. Mara stepped forward slowly. "This was a geological relay station," she said, her voice lowered by instinct. "Cold War era, maybe earlier." She pointed to a panel near the wall. "See those? Vibration sensors." They were measuring ground movement, seismic activity. Elias followed her gaze. "And transmitting it." "Exactly." He looked around the chamber, then back down the tunnel. "Animals would feel that before we ever could." Mara nodded. "That's why they left." Elias exhaled slowly. "So North Vale didn't build this." "They found it," Mara said, "and repurposed it." Rook moved suddenly. Not forward, back. One sharp step. Elias reacted instantly. His body shifted, lower, ready. The dog's ears lifted, eyes focused. Not on the room, on the floor ahead. Rook didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stood still. Then turned his head slightly toward Elias and blinked. Once, slow, deliberate. Elias froze. Something about that wasn't instinct, was communication. He stepped carefully forward, slow, measured. Then he saw it. A faint line in the floor. Too straight, too clean, pressure plate. Elias stepped back immediately. Trap. Mara inhaled sharply. "You're sure?" Elias pointed. "Look at the seam. It's not structural. It's placed." Mara crouched lower, examining it. "You stepped there." "Something triggers," Elias finished. Rook shifted slightly, satisfied. Elias looked down the corridor beyond the plate, then back at the dog. "You just saved me." The sound came then, from deeper inside. Footsteps. Not one. Two. Elias moved without hesitation. He grabbed a loose metal rod from beside one of the panels. Not a weapon, a tool. But it would do. Two men appeared at the far end of the chamber, both dressed in dark utility gear, heavy jackets, reinforced boots, gloves stained with oil. One was taller, broad-shouldered, his face rough with a short beard and a scar running along his jaw. The other was thinner, younger, his movements faster, eyes sharper, but less controlled. They stopped when they saw Elias, then glanced at Mara, then at the dog. "You're not supposed to be here," the taller one said. Elias didn't respond. Didn't need to. The thinner man moved first. Too fast, too aggressive. Elias stepped in, one motion, controlled. He swung the metal rod low, striking the man's wrist. The weapon he held, a short baton, fell instantly. The second man lunged. Elias pivoted, drove his shoulder into him, used momentum, not strength. The fight ended in seconds, not dramatic, not prolonged, efficient. The taller man hit the ground hard, didn't get back up. Mara stared for a second, then snapped out of it. "We don't have time." She moved to the control panel, hands moving fast, focused. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. "Interrupting their system," she said. She found a valve, old, rusted, connected to a pipe running along the wall. She twisted it, hard. At first, nothing. Then, a deep groan echoed through the structure. Water surged through the pipes. Lights flickered, systems stuttered. The low hum that had filled the space shifted, destabilized. Elias grabbed a small device from one of the nearby tables. A recorder, old, analog, dust-covered. Rook moved beside him, urgent. "Time to go," Elias said. A sound cut through the chamber, sharp, rising, alarm. Red lights flashed. They moved fast, back through the tunnel, past the pressure plate, up the ladder. The hatch opened. Cold air rushed in. They emerged into fading daylight. Breath visible in the cooling air. Behind them, from deep within the mountain, the alarm continued. Muffled, but relentless. Elias stood there for a moment, the recorder in his hand, the forest in front of him, the mountain behind. Rook stood at his side, still, alert. Mara looked at him. "What now?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked at the device, then at the ridge. "They built something under here," he said quietly. "Something they don't want anyone to hear." The mountain didn't answer. But it didn't need to. The mountain did not sleep that night. It listened. And somewhere deep within its stone, something answered back. The fire inside the cave burned low, its glow steady but dim, casting long shadows across the wooden walls and into the deeper curves of rock beyond. Outside, the forest had gone quiet again, but this time, the silence carried weight. Not emptiness. Expectation. Elias Thorne sat at the table, the small recorder resting in front of him. His hands were still, but not calm. Across from him, Mara Keene stood near the entrance, watching the basin below through the thin veil of night. Her posture was rigid, alert, one hand resting lightly near the strap of her backpack, as if she expected movement at any second. Rook lay beside Elias. Not curled, not resting, positioned, head up, eyes open, body angled slightly toward the cave entrance. Guarding Elias reached forward and pressed the play button. The recorder clicked. A soft hiss filled the room. Then, a voice. Old. Familiar. Agnes Thorne. "If you're hearing this," she began, her voice steady, unshaken by time, "then it means the mountain has decided you're ready." Elias didn't move, didn't breathe. "I was never hiding," Agnes continued. "Not from people, not from fear. I was waiting." The fire cracked softly. The sound felt too loud. "There are things buried beneath this ridge that don't belong to those who find them first," she said. "And there are people who will always believe otherwise." Elias's jaw tightened slightly. "Your parents came here once," Agnes said quietly. That hit differently. They didn't understand what they were looking at, but they felt it, the same way you will. And they left. A pause, then softer. Not because they were weak, because they knew when to walk away. Elias's hand clenched slightly against the table. His parents. He hadn't thought about them in years, not like this, not here. I stayed, Agnes said. Not to stop anything, not to fight, just to make sure the timing was right. The tape crackled faintly. And when the time comes, a pause, longer this time. You won't be alone. The recorder clicked. Silence returned. Elias stared at the device. Something inside him shifted. Not clarity, not yet, but something closer to understanding. Beside him, Rook moved. Not suddenly. Just enough. He leaned slightly closer, resting part of his weight against Elias's leg. Not seeking comfort, offering it. Elias let out a slow breath. Yeah, he murmured. I get it. Outside a sound, not wind, not water, engines. Mara turned instantly. They're here. Elias stood. Rook was already moving. The lights outside the cave flickered briefly, then steadied again. Not natural light. Artificial. Figures moved at the edge of the basin, shadows cutting through shadows. Deliberate. Organized. Silas Vane stepped forward into the light. He looked the same, perfectly composed, unchanged, even here. Behind him, several men spread out, forming a loose perimeter around the cave entrance. They moved with purpose, trained enough to know where to stand, where to watch. Silas clasped his hands lightly in front of him. His voice carried easily through the open space. You found it faster than I expected. Elias stepped forward, stopping just inside the threshold of the cave. Rook positioned himself slightly ahead. Between them. Mara shifted to the side, not retreating, just changing angle. Silas's gaze moved between them, then settled on Elias. You could walk away, Silas said calmly. Right now. No one needs to get hurt. Elias didn't respond. Silas tilted his head slightly. You don't understand what this place is, he continued. What it could become. Elias's voice came low, controlled. I understand enough. Silas's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sharpened. Resources like this, he said, don't exist to be ignored. They exist to be used. Elias stepped forward. One pace. Not everything needs to be touched, he said. Silas smiled, faint, almost disappointed. That's where you're wrong. The movement came from the side, fast. One of the men lunged. Elias reacted, but not fast enough. Rook was. The dog moved like a strike, a blur of muscle and intent. He hit the man's arm mid-swing, teeth clamping down just enough to disrupt, not to maim. The weapon dropped. Elias stepped in. One motion, one strike, clean. The man went down. Everything shifted. The others moved. Mara broke away, circling toward the edge of the cave. Elias, she called. Left side. Two men moved to intercept her, cutting her off from the entrance. Elias saw it. Calculated. But didn't move. Not yet. Silas remained still, watching, not intervening. See? Silas said quietly. It doesn't have to be this way. Elias's eyes didn't leave him. Behind them, the mountain hummed. Faint, but growing. Rook froze, mid-step. Not from fear, not from the men, from something else. His head turned. Toward the deeper part of the cave, toward the dark. And for the first time, there was hesitation. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Elias felt it. Before he understood it, Silas saw it too. His smile changed. "Ah," he said softly. "There it is." The shift. Silas moved. Not toward Elias, toward the interior. Elias stepped to block him. But two men moved between them. The fight was brief, violent, controlled. Elias broke through. But it cost him time. Mara struggled on the far side, pinned between two of the men, forced back toward the edge of the basin. She fought hard, precise, efficient. But she wasn't built for prolonged combat. "Go!" she shouted. "Don't let him get inside." Elias didn't hesitate. He turned. Ran. Rook was already ahead of him. They moved past the table. Past the recorder, past the wall. Into the deeper section of the cave. Behind them, Silas moved faster than expected. Not reckless. Driven. He reached the hidden compartment, pulled something from within. A device. Not large, but important. Elias saw it. Too late. Silas stepped back, retreated toward the tunnel entrance. "You're too late," he said calmly. Then he was gone. Elias stopped. Just for a second. Breathing hard. Then he moved again. Forward, into the dark. Rook didn't hesitate, didn't look back. Behind them, the sounds of the fight faded. Mara's voice, distant, still fighting, still holding. Elias didn't stop. The tunnel opened ahead, dark, deep, and whatever Silas had taken led there. Elias stepped into the shadow. Rook beside him. No hesitation, no doubt, no way back. Darkness did not feel empty. It felt alive. The tunnel narrowed as Elias Thorne pushed deeper into the mountain, his boots striking concrete in controlled, steady rhythm. The air grew warmer, thicker, carrying the scent of heated metal and something else. Ozone, faint but sharp, like a storm waiting beneath stone. Rook moved ahead of him. No hesitation, no doubt. Even injured, the German shepherd flowed through the darkness with purpose, every step deliberate. His body had changed since Elias first found him. Still thin, still marked by scars, but stronger now, more certain. Not just following, leading. Elias's breathing slowed. His mind sharpened. This wasn't pursuit anymore. This was resolution. The tunnel opened into the core chamber. Larger than the previous rooms. Circular, built into the mountain itself. At the center stood a reinforced relay console. Old steel, heavy switches, analog dials. But surrounding it were modern additions. Digital transmitters, signal boosters, compact servers feeding into cables that disappeared into the rock. The entire system hummed. Not loudly, but constantly. Silas Vane stood beside the console, alone. He didn't turn immediately. He didn't need to. "You're persistent," Silas said calmly. His voice carried through the chamber with unsettling clarity. Elias stepped forward. Stopped just short of the console. Rook positioned himself slightly ahead again, body low, ready. Silas finally turned. His face was unchanged, controlled, measured. But there was something else now. Not frustration, not anger. Something closer to inevitability. "You could have left," Silas said. "You had your chance." Elias didn't answer. Silas gestured lightly toward the machinery. "Do you understand what this is?" he asked. Elias's eyes moved across the system. The cables, the panels, the vibration monitors. "Enough," he said. Silas nodded once. "This network," he said, "was built to listen to the earth, to measure it, to understand movement before it became disaster." He stepped closer to the console. "And now," his hand rested on a modern control unit. "It can do more." Elias's gaze hardened. "You're using it to hide." Silas's expression didn't change. "I'm using it to control information," he said, to stay ahead of systems that would otherwise restrict progress. Progress, Elias repeated quietly. Silas's eyes sharpened slightly. Yes. Elias stepped closer, one pace. You're not building anything, he said. You're burying it. For the first time, Silas's smile faded. Everything valuable, Silas said, comes from beneath the surface. Oil, metal, data. This, he gestured around them, is no different. Elias shook his head slightly. Not everything down here belongs to you. Silas exhaled slowly, almost tired. That's where you're wrong, he said. His hand moved, fast, toward a switch on the console. Elias reacted. But Silas was already ahead. The system surged. Lights flickered violently. The hum deepened, then destabilized. Mara's voice echoed faintly through Elias's memory. Vibration, deep, not natural. Silas stepped back. Calm. I don't need this system intact, he said. I just need it erased. Elias froze for a second, then understood. If you overload it, Elias began. The data disappears, Silas finished. No evidence, no trace. The ground beneath them trembled. Subtle, but growing. Elias moved, fast. Rook moved faster. Silas lunged sideways, reaching for another control. Elias closed the distance. But not in time. Rook leapt, not at Silas, at the console. His body slammed into the panel, not to destroy it, but to knock Silas's hand off the final switch. The timing, exact. The system stuttered, paused, balanced on the edge of collapse, but not crossing it. Elias reached the console. His hand struck the override lever, pulled hard. The hum shifted, dropped, stabilized. Silas stepped back. For the first time, there was something in his eyes. Not fear, but recognition. You're willing to risk everything for this? He asked. Elias stood between him and the console, breathing steady. Not for this, he said. For the truth. Silas studied him, longer this time. Then he moved. Not toward the controls, toward the exit. Elias stepped to intercept, but stopped. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel, multiple, heavy, coordinated, voices. State Bureau, stay where you are. Silas didn't run. He didn't resist. He simply turned, hands lowering slightly at his sides. Agent Leia Torres entered first, tall, composed. Her posture was straight, controlled, her dark hair pulled back into a tight braid. Her face carried sharp lines, her eyes steady and unyielding. Someone who didn't rely on guesswork. Behind her, two agents moved in quickly, weapons drawn, but controlled. Torres's gaze moved across the room, took in everything. The system. The damage. Elias, Rook, Silas. Mr. Vane, she said calmly. Silas inclined his head slightly. Agent. No panic, no denial. Torres stepped forward. You're under arrest. Silas didn't argue, didn't resist. As the agent secured him, the chamber fell quiet again. The hum of the system settled into a steady rhythm. Stable, controlled. The mountain exhaled. Elias stepped back slowly. His hand rested briefly on the console. Rook moved beside him, pressed lightly against his leg. Not urgency, not warning, relief. Elias looked down at him, then back at the chamber. It's over, he said quietly. The mountain didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It was quiet again. Epilogue. Weeks passed. Winter settled over Black Hollow Ridge. Snow covered the basin in a soft, endless white, transforming the cave into something almost sacred. The sunlight still poured through the opening above, but now it reflected across the snow, filling the space with a pale, golden glow. Elias Thorne didn't leave. The house changed. Not completely, but enough. The structure was reinforced. The old wood repaired. The fireplace rebuilt to hold stronger heat. The radio left intact. Not as a tool, as a reminder. Outside, near the edge of the basin, a small workshop took shape. Simple, functional. Tools mounted carefully, machines repaired, and beside it, a fenced area. Not large, but deliberate. A place for dogs, strays, abandoned ones. Those that had nowhere else to go. Elias didn't talk about it. He didn't need to. Mara Keene returned often. Not every day. Not always for long. She would stand at the edge of the basin sometimes, watching the light shift across the cave walls. Then walk down. Quiet, unannounced. They didn't make promises, didn't define anything. They didn't need to. Inside the house, above the fireplace, a single object hung on the wall. The iron key, dark, worn. Agnes Thorne's. Rook lay beneath it, curled in the same place Agnes had once sat, not guarding, not waiting, belonging. Elias stood in the doorway one evening, watching the light fade across the snow. The mountain was quiet again. Not empty, not forgotten, at peace. He didn't feel like a man passing through anymore. For the first time in years, he felt like he had arrived. Some places are not meant to be found. They don't call out, they don't reveal themselves, they wait. And sometimes all they need is someone willing to come back. Sometimes, the greatest miracles do not arrive as thunder from the sky or signs we can easily recognize. Sometimes, they come quietly, through a second chance, a path we never planned to walk, or a companion who finds us when we have forgotten how to be found. Elias thought he was returning to a forgotten place. But what he truly found was purpose, healing, and a reason to stand again. And Rook, a wounded dog who chose to trust once more, reminds us that even the deepest scars do not have the final word. In our own lives, there are moments that feel broken, silent, or lost. But God often works in those quiet places. He places the right people, the right paths, and the right signs in front of us, not always loudly, but always with intention. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to take one more step forward, even when we do not fully understand where it leads. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need hope today. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and what part of this journey touched your heart the most. And if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories like this. May God watch over you, protect your home, guide your path, and bring peace to you and your family wherever you are.